This is Confessions of a Dominatrix, Episode 3, Curiosity and Consequence. The spicy middle child. I was the middle one, the spicy one. Not the baby or the golden child, but the one who tested the edges. I'd roll my eyes at the sermon, smirk at the applause, and say the quiet thing that made grown-ups' faces shift in surprise. I learned early where to prod, so the room reacted. A poke here, a poke there, just enough to see a flank twitch. My mother's pinch under the table taught me about consequences. I knew which words hurt, which jokes would buy me the lash later. I wasn't a troublemaker for trouble's sake. I was an experimenter of temperature, seeing how hot a place could get before you had to move away. That early talent, the ability to provoke and then read the fallout, became a survival skill. It taught me who would escalate and who would apologize. It taught me to bow and when to stand. The first lesson, performance and silence. We performed recitals, shows, competitions. My family's performing arts life polished our faces for the world. Neat hair, polite applause, perfect curtsies. On the surface, it was disciplined beauty. Beneath it, respect was demanded, not earned. Adults who clapped could also be dangerous. Their praise smelled like control. Their compliments carried a price. I learned to smile while my insides cataloged what was true, who was kind, who was cruel, who had secrets they hid behind a palm. Children in that household were taught to be small when it suited the elders. You learned to watch the room for the warning signs, a voice that dropped, a hand that tightened, a laugh that never reached the eyes. That watching was my first education in perception. It taught me to notice not only what people said, but how they said it and what they didn't say. Because I pushed, sometimes I paid. Because I provoked, I learned where the walls were thin. I tested my mother's patience because I needed to know the boundary lines for my own safety. I wanted to see which rules were brittle. I wanted to know when the facade would crack. Early conditioning, being taught to obey. As a girl, I was taught that tone could keep you safe. You learned quickly when you apologize, when you smile, and when silence was the only right answer. Being ladylike wasn't about grace. It was about control. They were training you to be obedient long before you even knew what obedience cost. To be feminine meant to bend. To be respectful meant to stay quiet. But somewhere between punishment and politeness, I started noticing how power worked. I learned that tone could soften a man's anger or provoke it, that the wrong word could light a match in someone already burning inside. So I studied tone like survival. Every little girl learns this curriculum in secret. When to speak, when to defer, when to look down, and how to make that look seem polite. They call it good etiquette, and I call it early crisis training. The first predators, reality digitized. When the internet came, the theater of performance moved to a new stage, one lit by a cold blue glow and silly usernames. Chat rooms felt like alleys at first, then like markets, then like a hall of mirrors. I was honest about my age. I said I was 15 and 16. I told the truth. And I learned something cold. Honesty doesn't stop predators. It only clarifies how willing they are to ignore the obvious. Grown men messaged in polite sentences that turned sharp if you didn't reply how they wanted. Compliments arrived like paper boats with knives folded inside. The attention was intoxicating because it felt like validation until it didn't. I met some of them. That was my choice. Youthful curiosity colliding with poor guidance, and a world that taught me to charm rather than protect myself. I wasn't seeking harm, though. I was trying to practice womanhood in a world that taught me how to perform it, but not how to own it. Those early, frightening encounters taught me a brutal truth. Predators don't always creep in the dark. Sometimes they sit in chat rooms, calling themselves fathers or businessmen. Sometimes they wear compliments like coats until they're knifing with them. Lesson 1. Trust your gut. Lesson 2. Curiosity is natural. Protection is learned. Lesson 3. You can be curious and cautious at the same time. Teach kids the difference. Curiosity and consequence. A teenage balance. I don't condemn curiosity. I was curious. I'm always curious. I wanted to understand my body, my magnetism, my own power. Most teenagers do. The problem isn't the question, it's who answers. So I'll tell the story plainly because it matters. A young person with curiosity and no map is vulnerable. They'll find answers in places that have no business giving them. Every woman learns to navigate this tightrope. When to be direct, when to step aside, when to be submissive because the world punishes defiance. But as you grow into your femininity, you learn strategy. You learn tone. You learn that words can de-escalate or detonate someone. And if you don't train that awareness on purpose, you'll just keep re-triggering yourself and calling it love, loyalty, or survival. Here's what I tell my younger self and anyone else navigating intimacy right now. You can pursue curiosity slowly. You can negotiate intimacy like a contract. You don't have to rush the learning curve because nobody gives you a manual for your life. You create it. Ask, pause, and if anything feels off, step back and reevaluate. That pause is a tool. Use it. Instinct as language, the transition into training. All that early work, the prodding, the testing, the online scares, it all built a vocabulary within me. Not words, but instincts. A narrowing jaw, a breath that shortens, a body that leans forward when it wants to dominate. These are dialects of intent. I went to the gym to translate that language into movement. Boxing, wrestling, MMA, not because I wanted to fight other women for sport, but because I was done being surprised by violence from people I trusted. I trained to read the metric system of the human body: timing, range, weight, distribution. Martial arts rewired that old programming. It taught me that regulation is a learned discipline. You don't escape fear by avoiding it. You rebuild your nervous system until fear obeys you. That's what I teach women now. To know when to yield, when to move, and when to strike. Not as an act of aggression, but as a reclaiming of choice. Training taught me to take data from pain. If someone snarls before they strike, that tells you something different than someone who smiles and then lashes out. Muscle memory makes decision-making faster than thought. It turns panic into practice. Weapons and preparation, not glory, but practicality. I learned weapons too, not for trophies, for options. A person who depends on one tool has only one weakness. Knowing several ways to defend, to disarm, and to exit, that's survival engineering. I learned how people carry intent in their hands, not in the weapons, but in the posture. A hand hovering near a pocket, legs shifting when someone imagines moving. Those micro movements became maps for me. Weapons were just a way to give myself more margin inside those maps. If you teach self-defense, you teach negotiation first. Teach how to set the room so the worst case scenario becomes unlikely. Fight training is valuable, but situational awareness buys you time to use it. Provoke and read The Art of Tempo. Remember how I said I used to provoke? That habit became a tool. It taught me how people escalate. If I could push a button and watch a face change, I learned the speed of their reaction. Was it shame, anger, fear, or calculation maybe? Knowing that speed mattered. Provoking meant I learned rhythm. How quickly does someone move from discourse to violence? How long until they blame you for their own reaction? Those answers let me plan exits, prepare defenses, or decide to stay and finish the lesson. You can practice this without cruelty. Say something mildly out of step with the group and observe, not to shame anyone, but to calibrate your sense of how others can take offense. It teaches safety and respect, and it teaches negotiation. It teaches where the room's heat really lives. Reading people. Micro signs and macro consequences. The signs are small. A throat clear that's too late. Shoulders that don't relax after a laugh. A foot drifting toward the door mid-conversation. The control the body exerts reveals the control the mind wants. I teach people to read those signs ethically. Notice them. Don't weaponize them. Use them to choose safety. If someone's reaction shows rising aggression, create distance. If it shows manipulation, set a frame. If you can't set it, leave. Just leave. The moral of perception is responsibility. You can't surveil a room and then mock the people inside it. Use awareness to protect, to teach, to hold space where honesty is possible. The turn from survival to service. All this, my provocation practice, my internet scars, my fight training, fold it into the work I do now. Reading danger became a transferable skill. When a woman takes my personal protection class, I don't just teach kicks and blocks. I teach language. How to notice micro movements. How to set a boundary and take it back when someone erodes it. How to negotiate, yes, but also how to change the environment so negotiation isn't needed. Here's the practical lesson. The body tells the truth before the mouth decides to lie. Learn to listen to it. Name the truth. Build options around it. That's how you keep a life from being decided by someone else's bad impulse. Balance. The creative cool down. When the day is done, the edge needs cooling. For me, that's creatively. I build, I sew, I fabricate. Leather, metal, thread. They are all my reset. The rhythm of hammer and stitch returns my nervous system to pattern instead of panic. Creation isn't an escape. It's recalibration for me. In the workshop, I measure twice and strike once. That discipline feels like prayer. If you work in survival spaces as a guard or nurse or parent, find the thing that rewires you back to softness. It's not optional. It's maintenance. What to teach the next generation? Give kids language before you give them rules. Teach the vocabulary of consent. Ask, pause, name the feeling, state the boundary. Teach negotiation. Slow your breath. Hold your space. Use your words clearly. Teach practical exits. Plan, text, check in. Abstinence is tidy in theory. Reality is not, though. Our job is to give teenagers the tools to move through curiosity without being ruined by it. They'll be curious. We make that curiosity survivable. Teach them to trust their gut. Teach them to ask for a pause. Teach them to map people by their actions, not words. Teach them to negotiate intimacy like a contract, not a dare. The edge as choice. Fear taught me to see. Curiosity taught me to act. Training taught me to choose. And creation taught me to stay sane in the choosing. The work I do is a chain of small decisions made under pressure. Breathe, observe, decide. It's not heroism, it's method. Anyone can learn it, and everyone should. If you want to be safe, start by reading the room you live in. If you want to be free, teach the people you love how to read others. That's the cost and the gift of curiosity. I am Miss Hayes. I learned to provoke without breaking, to read without weaponizing, and to turn survival into a classroom. The consequences of not knowing are heavy. The consequences of knowing can be liberating. Until next time, pay attention, be curious, but be deliberate. And when the room gets hot, remember, you can always move. Bodyguard breakdown. A diary truth. To protect another's life is not an act of force. It is an oath. I am an executive protection specialist, not by lineage, but by merit. I earned my armor, one bruise, one breath, one test at a time. An armed bodyguard is not a weapon. She is a whisper of awareness, a storm beneath a suit. My training did not begin with guns. It began with fear. It was molded in nightclubs and back alleys, under strobe lights and in silence. To watch without being seen, to calculate before anyone else senses the danger. This is the art of guardianship. Sometimes you're not on duty, but the war finds you. I was having lunch. Then I was breaking up a fight between a woman and her past. There was no time for questions, only instinct. I've pulled people out of violence, sometimes out of themselves. A protector does not always wear a badge. Sometimes she's wearing jeans and a stare that definitely doesn't blink. What I learned in the ring, in the hallway of a penthouse, on the sidewalk while being followed, all of it bleeds into my presence. I don't raise my voice, I raise my presence. Whether I'm dealing with entitled clients, aggressive drunks, or the occasional coward hiding behind a screen, I become the mirror of their threat, but sharper. I don't just train to hit, I train to end the threat. Women are natural deceivers of expectation. We blend, we mislead, we are underestimated. And in that underestimation, we hold the greatest edge. Weapons are easier to carry. Disguises are more believable. No one expects the velvet voice to house a blade. That is our gift. To protect without warning. To dominate without apology. I became a dominatrix through pain. I became a bodyguard through fire. I became a mother through blood. And I remain all three, not as roles, but as reflections of who I have always been. You have met the voice. You have met the blade. Next, you'll meet the storm. Until then, walk unseen, watch everything, and strike with purpose. Thank you.